أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، خاتم النبيين، رحمة للعالمين، نبي القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله، صلى الله عليك يا ابن رسول الله. روحي وجسمي وأرواح العالمين لك الفداء. يا مظلوم، يا غريب، يا شهيد بأرض كربلاء. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. صلوا على محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. I was talking last night about the challenge of creating a good, proper family. Because it is from the family that the society emerges. I talked about the duties and role of the parents, how we should interact with our senior citizens, if you will recall, quoting many verses from the Quran, of the relationship and the core values that binds the husband and the wife. Today I want to concentrate on a topic which has been very dear for me. For over 30 years I've been talking about it, because that is the future of Islam as far as I'm concerned. The younger generation, the youth. Because you build this center, you have bought this center not only for yourselves, but primarily so as to perpetuate and transmit Islam to the next generation, the younger generation, the youth. We are living in a global community, what is called a global village. Globalization does impact Islam also. Have we ever wondered, what does Islamic globalization mean? What does globalization mean for Muslims and for Islam? What this has meant is that Islam is no longer confined to a particular area, to a particular country or territory. Globalization has meant that Muslims have been deterritorialized. Deterritorialized means they are no longer confined to a particular territory. You might be surprised to know that Muslims have been migrating from their own lands to America, for example. Most of my experience is in America. The first Muslim to arrive in America that we know of for sure was in 1517. We even know his name, Esteban, from Spain, 1517. And there were many other Muslims who came after that. For example, you may have heard of Takim, the slave trade. Up to 10 to 15% of those slaves from West Africa who came to America, or I should say who went to America, were Muslims. We know them because of the names that appear on the slave register. When you see a name like Umar bin Sa'id, for example, or Al-Bilali, Ibrahim, etc., they were all Muslims. So Islam has become deterritorialized, it has expanded. What many of us do not even know, this has come, I only came to know as I was writing my last book called Shiaism in America, was that even on the Titanic, there were 3 Shias. And 2 of them perished, 1 survived. The reason why she survived was because she was a woman. As you know, women were allowed on the boat. Her name we also know, Fatima Masalmani. I've even met her niece. It goes to show how Muslims have expanded and gone well beyond their territory. What is important for us to note is that never in Islamic history have Muslims lived outside their territory as much as they do now. In most of their history, Muslims have lived in what we call Darul Islam, the abode of Islam. Whereas for the first time in the history, there are more and more, literally millions of Muslims living either in the West or in Singapore, to the extent, you may find this hard to believe, but there even is a mosque in the tundra, in the Arctic. And if you don't believe me, look up on Google, the Mosque of the Midnight Sun is called, or the Arctic Mosque. That mosque, it is so cold there, they could not even build the mosque there. They had to build it in Canada, a place called Winnipeg, and transport it 4,000 miles by barge and by towing it into Nunavut, the area is called. What I'm trying to prove to you is how wide and far Islam has spread. It's called the Mosque of the Midnight Sun. But this spread of Islam has created its own challenges. The great challenges is not only for the immigrants, us parents, but especially for the younger generation. What has happened is, and I should tell you that my experience is not based on Singapore, maybe it doesn't apply here. I come from North America, I've lived most of my life in North America, so what I have to say, not taking it personally, is based on what I have experienced. What has happened is that Muslims, as they have gone outside their land, they have settled in America, in Canada, in Britain, they have created what we call homesick mosques. In other words, they felt so homesick that they built their own ethnic mosques. So for example, you come to Toronto, where I live, you will have an Afghani mosque, an Iranian mosque, an Iraqi mosque, a Pakistani mosque, a Khoja mosque. I do not know whether we have an Islamic mosque anywhere. Because we are so spread out ethnically that we have actually divided rather than connected with ourselves. I do understand that we need multiple mosques because sometimes of the distances, sometimes because we cannot all fit in one mosque. That is natural. But sometimes I have known myself areas where there is one mosque here, we're talking of Shia mosque, we're not even talking of other mosques. Shia mosque, one side of the road, and exactly the opposite, another mosque. So we have stopped worshipping Allah, we worship our own selves and our own egos. He has built a mosque, I should build one too. That is the extent of division that sometimes we create. Indeed, we have created more boundaries between Muslims. What we have failed to realize is the impact that this has on the next generation. Because the more we isolate ourselves, the more we isolate our youth also. And that is the biggest danger. We ourselves, most of us have been brought up in Islamic lands, we know Islam, etc. Alhamdulillah. But remember, we are talking not only of our youth, but our grand youth also. Not only our children, but our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren also. These different homesick mosques, as I call them, have sometimes very little connection between them, In fact, I will go and tell you very honestly, again, based on my experience, a Shia youth is more likely to interact with a non-Muslim than with a fellow Shia youth from a different ethnicity. In other words, take for example, you will hardly have a case whereby a Khoja young girl is married to a Lebanese boy, or an Iranian girl is married to an Iraqi boy. More likely that Iranian girl will marry outside the community, and that Iraqi boy will marry outside the community too. Because there is very little interaction within the Shia community itself. This is what I call the immigrant Islam phenomenon. Immigrant Islam phenomenon is the idea that Muslims who have migrated here tend to think that their understanding, their expression of Islam is the one and only possible expression of Islam. In other words, Iraqis think that what they are doing is the one and only possible way, Iranians think the same way. Consequently, what is alien to immigrant Islam is alien to Islam itself, they think. In other words, because of their own immigrant issues, anything which impacts or threatens their culture, they see it as a threat to Islam itself. We have bonded culture and Islam so much that sometimes what is religious has become culture, which is culture has become religious. In other words, adat is culture, custom, ibadat is religion. Our ibadat has become adat, adat has become ibadat. I'll give you an example from my own culture. I come from the Khoja community. On the wedding night, our culture is that, I do not know about the ladies here, but we must give the watch to the ladies first. Is that in your culture? Or in my culture, if there is no watch, there is no marriage. It is very important. So, Gariya Jarur Devanushya, you have to give me Gariya, what is called watch. That Gariya, that watch, is actually not ibadah, that's an adat. That's a culture. What is actually necessary to give by Sharia is the mahar. Technically, half the mahar is supposed to be given at the time of the aqd, and the other half before the consummation of the marriage. Although we can delay it now, that's a different issue, that's a custom, we are delaying. But instead of giving the mahar, we give the watch first. Our adat has become ibadat. Ibadat has become adat. So much so, as I say, that anyone who threatens that culture is seen as threatening Islam itself. Sometimes I get Pakistani youth, with all due respect. The children come and tell me, my daddy tells me I must go to Pakistan every summer. Why should you go to Pakistan every summer? So that I become more Islamic. Really? I said, Islam, the reason why your daddy is sending you to Pakistan every summer is not to make you more Islamic, but to make you more Pakistani, my friend. Because Islam does not reside in Pakistan, Islam resides in your heart. Faith does not depend on where you are, faith depends on who you are. You can be in Makkah and be the perfect kafir. You can be in Timbuktu and be the perfect Muslim. Because faith is within you, not outside you. Sallu ala Muhammad. See, because of this immigrant Islam, ethnic Islam, as I call it, phenomenon, one of the great professors of this time is a convert to Islam. He's a black convert. He's Professor Sherman Jackson. I don't know if you've heard the term busing. In the 1960s, busing meant that the blacks would actually not be allowed to sit with the whites in America, the same bus. They would have to sit at the back. So whites front, and in the front of the bus, and the black would sit at the back. It's called busing. Sherman Jackson said that after becoming Muslims, we went from being the back of the bus to becoming back of the camel now. From back of the bus to back of the camel. In other words, even Muslims have discriminated against blacks. Instead of treating them as equal, which is what it's supposed to be, because in Islam everybody is equal, we were put back of the camel. This is what we mean, that globalization has created a challenge to the youth community. Why? Because let's not forget, the youth are brought up in the West. Most of our youth, the ones that I deal with, only know Pakistan by name or Iraq by name, or maybe they go and visit there from time to time. They are born American, they are dressed American, they speak American, they eat American too. When you talk to them in the older days, when we meet each other, we say Salam Alaikum. But theirs is what we call a yo culture. You know, yo culture? Yo, Salam Alaikum, yo. Then you put up yo, Alaikum Salam, yo. Because that is the way they think. And there's nothing wrong in it. Just as we became culturally Pakistanis or culturally Iraqis, culturally Iranians, they are culturally Americans because they live here. What is more important is that we inject the right kind of Islam to them, the proper Islam, rather than the Islam which is sometimes distorted by culture. What you will find when you talk to your youth is this. They are seeking a global Islamic identity, not a cultural Islamic identity. They are differentiating, I'm talking about the youth, between our Islam and the Islam. Our Islam is our cultural Islam. The Islam is the Islamic Haqiqi, the Quranic Islam. Sallu ala Muhammad. In other words, they have challenged their parents many a time of their cultural practices. This is called a process of re-Islamization. Re-Islamization means to find the true Islamic identity. Because most of the youth cannot relate to the Iranian, Iraqi, Afghani, or Pakistani, or Khoja identity. Simply because they are brought up, born and raised in a very different culture. As I say, the language of the speaker, the way that they dress, etc., all shows that they are very much North American. The youth then, and this is sometimes, I don't think that we as parents fully understand the dilemma of the youth. Understand this much, my sisters and brothers, and I don't mean this in any condescending way. I don't mean to insult or offend anybody. But I'm talking from my experience of having 30 years of having interacted with the youth. Our youth live in two separate worlds. We don't do that. Because we have not really gone to, most of us have not gone to universities. For whatever reasons, we have been brought up very simply. We are businessmen, we work hard, etc., and provide for them, fine. But our youth are brought in a different world. 90% of our youth go to universities. They go to colleges. They are trained in a different way of thinking. I teach in a university, I know. When they come to the mosque, they have a different kind of experience of living. And they have the challenge of reconciling these two different worlds. And I'll show you what I mean. In the universities, they are challenged to think, to reason, to interact with the speaker, to question. In the mosque, they come and says, just listen to the Mullah, whatever he says. We do not have any dialogue. We do not have any question or questioning of the mosque. In fact, many a time, and again I'm generalizing here, in the mosque, the youth who are very intelligent, who are trained in the universities, are confronted with rituals which they cannot even understand, that they cannot identify themselves with. I asked the youth, because one of the biggest challenges we have in America today is that we have mosques, but we do not have youth in the mosque. We have the same old people who are seniors who are already coming. I said, why are the mosques empty? He says the emptiness of the mosque is because of the emptiness of our hearts. In other words, we build big structures. We build the outside of the mosque, but not the inside of the mosque. We build big structures, big buildings. Fine, you come to Toronto, mashallah, we spent over $20 million there. $20 million, we built a huge, humongous mosque. You go on a Thursday, you see the same kind of people every Thursday. The youth are not there. So because we build the big structures, but we forget to build the souls and the hearts of those who are going to occupy that mosque. Many a time I find we speak about the youth, but we do not speak to the youth. We speak about the devotees, this and that, but how do we engage them? Do we speak to the youth? So the Rahbar was telling me, and I was so happy that you actually have youth camps here, whereby they can interact, they can question, they can understand, they can inquire. That is one very important way of engaging the youth. What they tell me is that we, in the West generally, have adjusted our language. Before, in my culture, we used to speak Urdu, although technically we were not from Pakistan. Our grandfathers came from Gujarat in India. But our majalis were always in Urdu because the Maulanas came from India and Pakistan, which is fine. Once we migrated to the West, the youth said, we cannot understand this. In fact, one day I'm told, a father took his son to the mosque. He says, better come with me to the mosque. The young boy says, Daddy, I cannot understand the Maulana. He's speaking in Urdu. I don't speak Urdu. So the father said, even if you understand a little bit, it's okay, let's go. So he took him to the mosque. On the way back, the father asked, Beta, what did you understand from this madness? The young boy says, Daddy, I'll be honest with you, I did not understand anything. But I know that this Maulana loves cheese. Says why? He kept saying, Joe, cheese maker, I was cheese cheese in Urdu means one thing. In English it means something completely different. All he could understand was cheese, cheese, cheese. The Maulana, cheese in Urdu forgot to understand this thing. What I'm trying to say is how there was a disconnect between the youth community and the elder generation. What they are saying is this, you have changed the language, yes. From Urdu now we speak, most of our lectures are in English in North America. But the substance has to change too, not only the language. In other words, the youth needs things talked about which will connect the outside world with the mosque community itself. The mosque to be relating to what is happening outside, the challenges too. Today we have challenges, issues. that the youth are always confronted with. Issues of IVF. You know IVF? In vitro fertilization. A woman who cannot get pregnant, can you have test tube babies, for example? What is the Islamic perspective on euthanasia, for example? How do you pray if you are living in the North Pole? There are Muslims, by the way, living in Antarctica. We don't know this, but one of our own brothers, Khoja brothers, has a glacier named in the Antarctica. You can Google him, Siuji Glacier. He's such a prominent scholar that the whole glacier in Antarctica has been named after our own person. So what I'm saying is the challenges of the youth are far more, and we need to make sure that we preserve them within the community rather than drive them away from the community. Sallu ala Muhammad. In particular, we should also be aware of our girls, the younger generation of girls. We focus so much on the boys at times that we forget the sisters. Remember this much, my sisters and brothers. It's a very important point that we are living in a multiple minority circle. What I mean by that is this. When you are a Muslim in the West, you are immediately a minority, correct? Because the majority are Americans, for example. You are a Muslim, you are a minority. You are a Shia Muslim, you are a minority within the Muslim community. You happen to be, for example, Pakistani, you are a minority within the Shia community also. And if you happen to be a youth, you are a minority within the Pakistani American Shia community. And God help if you are a woman within that youth too. Because you are a minority within a minority within a minority. What that creates is a sense of isolation, a sense of disconnect. In the universities, when these girls come, they are able to interact, they are able to connect with this professor. When they come to a mosque, in many American mosques, I do not know about here, alhamdulillah, here, at least they are here in front of us, they are put in some stinking basement where they cannot even see the speaker, maybe just on the TV if they are lucky. And the youth girls say, why should we go to the mosque? We are not able to interact at all. I did a survey when I wrote my last book, She's in America, and one of the questions I asked is, what role do women play in the mosque? What role do women play in the mosque? There was one answer I got is, they make tea after the program. They make tea after the program. Is it the only thing that women do in your mosque? Isn't that a shame? Let us make it clear that we should not isolate them because they are isolated outside. If we isolate them in our own mosques, then they will stop coming to the mosque. And we should not be surprised if they stop coming to the mosque. I want to bring up another point again, which we as Muslims hardly ever think about, which is the sense of isolation for the youth. As I said, because of these ethnic centers, Pakistani youth are isolated from, for example, Iranian youth. They speak the same language, all of them speak English. But because of these ethnic centers, Iraqi youth are isolated from Afghani youth in the mosque. Once they go to the universities, you know what happens? They are isolated from fellow Muslims too. Because, and I'll be very honest with you, once the Wahhabis, Salafis, MSA is Muslim Student Association, once they know you are a Shia, you are out. They don't want to know you. And they will know you are a Shia very easily. In other words, our own youth are isolated not only in the mosques, but even on campuses, even at the universities. I'll give you my own example. I don't mean to personalize it, but it shows you how isolated we Shias have become. I have been teaching in my master university in Canada since 2009. It's my 8th year now. The MSA, Muslim Student Association, first they welcomed me. Soon they came to know that I'm Shia. Until today, they have not asked me to speak even at one event. To the extent that students are telling each other, do not take Professor Takim's classes because he's Shia. Can you believe it? I'm a good professor, I don't give F- to anybody. But still, that goes to show the extent of discrimination, which I'm sure you all have experienced many a time. Wallahi, this is true. I face more discrimination from fellow Muslims than from non-Muslims. Non-Muslims will respect me more than these Wahhabis and Salafis. The moment they know you are Shia, Shia is kafir. This is the sense of loneliness and isolation that our youth face outside. My sisters and brothers, it is important that we, within the community, make sure that our youth hang out with each other. In Canada, we call them cool Muslims, you know. I'm a frozen Muslim in Canada. But they say we have to be cool Muslim. You can be a cool Muslim provided you hang out with the right kind of Muslim. The Quran provides us with a kind of what we may call a role model. You know what it is? In Surah Al-Kahf, Surah number 18 in the Quran, the Ashab al-Kahf. نحن نقص عليك نبأهم بالحق. We are telling you the story about them, the true story about these youths who actually isolated themselves from the community because this was an unjust community. They counteracted negative peer pressure with positive peer pressure. By hanging out together, Allah says, إِنَّهُمْ فِئَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى. They were a group who believed in the Lord. And because they believed in the Lord, they counteracted negative peer pressure with positive peer pressure. We increase the guidance towards them. They made great and personal sacrifices for the sake of reversing that negative peer pressure. Sallu ala Muhammad wa
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
I know that you are all tired, you know, but you excuse me if I go a bit overboard today because we started a bit later and tomorrow is a holiday, right here? So excuse me if I go slightly a bit more because I want to make a few points. I know that we have quite a few youth here. My next message is to the parents themselves because the parents need to open up communication with their youth, with their children. The first madrasa, the first point of learning is at home itself. Remember this much, my sisters and brothers, even before your youth goes outside, there are various voices, different voices talking to your youth inside the home also. They haven't even gone outside. You want me to count for you? There's email, there's Gmail, there's snail mail, there's junk mail, there's television, there's pages, there's text. Can't count now. WhatsApp, Viber, Tango, what else do they? FaceTime. All these voices are coming to our home, to our youth, even before they step outside. And of course, there is the internet too. So it is important that we communicate with them. Above all, treat them with love and respect. There is a beautiful model in Hazrat Fatima Zahra alayha salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Look at how she addresses her children. Huh? You remember Taht al-Kisa, you've heard it so many times. When Imam Hassan comes in, what does she say? Ya qurrata aini wa thamarata khwali. I don't know if we ever address our children like that. Oh, the delight of my eyes and the fruits of my heart. The delight of my eyes and fruits of my heart. That's why Imam Ali also says that bring up your children differently from the way that you were brought up. Because your time was different from theirs. Your conditions, your circumstances were different from theirs. So don't think that because my parent brought me up this way, I must bring up my child the same way. You will be shocked and surprised how many of our children in America end up in foster homes. You know, foster homes is not a Muslim home at all. Because the parents end up smacking their children, hitting their children. I, as an educator, the moment I see a mark on a child, I'm bound by law, I'm bound and required to report that mark immediately. That this child is being abused. Now, whether being abused or not is immaterial. The point is we need to know how to bring up our children. How, for example, that you never ever discipline in anger. When you are angry, you do not discipline your child. You do not humiliate your child in front of their peers. And even when you criticize, be positive in your criticism. For example, your son, you told him, okay, curfew is 10 o'clock, you must be home at 10 o'clock. He comes in at 10:30. What are you going to do? Wait there at the door like Malik al-Maut? You know that and you're in trouble. So let him come in first of all. Let him cool down. Then you can criticize. Then you can discipline. And disciplining is not by smacking, my friends. You know, my son is 17-year-old. The best form of discipline for him, you tell him, no, what do they call Sega Genesis, Nintendo, PS3 and PS4 for 1 week. That hurts. That hurts much more than a smack, believe me. You tell them no PS4 or PS3 or whatever they have for 1 week, that's ouch. That really does hurt. There are different ways of disciplining rather than smacking, etc. My sisters and brothers, the next point that I'm going to raise, I know it's controversial, but I do feel very, very strongly about it because it is impacting our community. I don't know about Singapore, but I perform marriages too, as Molanas also do, I'm sure. 25% of the marriages I perform is with our youth marrying outside the community. Now, we always welcome people to come to Islam, by all means. I know, mashallah, quite a few of you have converted to come to Islam. Ahlan wa sahlan, of course. We welcome them. But when somebody becomes a Muslim 5 minutes before a marriage, and then you don't see them again, instead of them coming to Islam, they take our youth away from Islam. This is where the problem lies. The problem is this. We used to have our matchmaking, day or way of bringing the boy and the girl together in our homeland, whatever that homeland may have been. And we try and do the same thing in America. It does not work, my friends, because our matchmaking ways are traditional, are out of date. To give you an example, one young girl called me once, and I was talking to her. She says, "Uncle, I do not go to the mosque." A young girl telling me. I said, "Why not?" He says, "When I go to the mosque, I feel it's a fashion parade, whereby I'm dressing up for my prospective mother-in-law, to the extent that one of these female matchmakers, she's telling me, went and asked her, and mashallah, she was a bit what we call horizontally challenged. I mean fat a little bit, anyway. I can't say fat is a little bit horizontally challenged. Anyway, so she says that one of these traditional matchmakers asked me, which means in Urdu or in English, how much do you weigh? Can you imagine someone asks, oh, how much do you weigh? These girls, mashallah, they are very smart. She said to the matchmaker, how much do you weigh, first of all? How much do you weigh? The ways are completely updated. I've always advocated, in order to bring the youths together, we should do it within the confines of the Sharia. I'm not saying we should go outside the Sharia. But let's give them a chance to interact, to match, to meet with each other. Because if we do not allow that, we'll find more and more of our youth going outside the community. More and more of our youth marrying outside the community. Many of the parents, they criticize me when I talk to them like this. The only time they agree with me is when, when one of their own daughters or sons is marrying outside the community. Then it hits home. The scenario is just like this. Imagine, there is a father, and the daughter is called Zainab. The father drops the daughter at the university. He says, Lady Zainab, you see there's John there. There's Paul there. There's Mike there. You can talk to them. You can interact with them, but you cannot marry them. And then the same father brings Zainab to the mosque itself. Says, Lady Zainab, you see there's Ali. There's Muhammad. There's Bakr. You cannot talk to them. You cannot interact with them, but you must marry one of them. It's not going to happen, my friends. It's not going to jive. Because these days the circumstances have changed. And our community must evolve accordingly. Otherwise, we will see increased marriages outside the community. And as I said, we should do it within the confines of the Sharia. The Sharia does allow supervised chaperoning. I'm not talking of going outside the Sharia. And things happen even worse in smaller communities. For example, in a community like in Miami, or in Edmonton, or in Denver, where our girls and our boys do not get a chance at home to meet. And consequently, there is to be a nationwide, if you like, connection between them. My sisters and brothers, our youth are very smart. They are very smart. Young kids also, because they are brought up in this culture. And to give you an example of how smart they are, a friend of mine who's a teacher in the madrasa, he was teaching a 5-year-old, and he wanted to test the 5-year-old. He says, the Quran says that Nabi Yunus was eaten by a whale. How can a whale eat a prophet? The palate, the mouth of the whale is too small to eat a whole prophet. How can that happen? 5-year-old, what can he answer? He scratched his head, he says, I don't know the answer, but when I meet Nabi Yunus in heaven, I'll ask him. But this teacher wanted to probe a bit more. Look at how smart our 5-year-olds are. So, okay, supposing Yunus is in hell, then what would you do? And the youth said, then you can ask him there. A 5-year-old sending his teacher to hell. This is how smart our youth are. And we need to cope with these challenges. My sisters and brothers, my time is running short. But this much I will say before I finish. That we are living in a global world. Global world has created its own challenges, especially for the younger generation who are living in a Western environment, who are brought up in a different culture, with a different mindset. One of the greatest challenges that our youth face is the internet. Yes, the internet can be a blessing. It can also be a curse. The reason is that there's too much knowledge out there in the hands of too many people, but that knowledge which is fragile. There is no censorship on the internet. And therefore people put fatwas here and there, you know. They heard fatwas like this and that. I always thank Allah for that person who created the delete button on my keyboard, you know. Because people get some fatwa from someone without even checking what is right or wrong. They just forward it, thinking that we have to do. You don't have to forward anything, my friends. You have to check something before you forward it. I get so many fatwas that when Coca-Cola is haram, Colgate is haram, bread is haram. Don't want to starve us to death. Who said that? So therefore be careful. Because the problem with the internet is this, that religious knowledge is disseminated in virtual space. There is no censorship. And therefore many of these people who are delivering these so-called fatwas are self-taught, who have what we call half-baked scholars. They have not got proper scholarship, not proper knowledge. What has happened because of the internet? Somebody goes on the internet, uploads or downloads a particular sermon, and you find he's becoming a mufti and reciting madrasas and reciting on the minbar. You will find, especially if you go to the Mosque Ahl Sunnah, on a Jummah khutbah, somebody who is an accountant delivering a khutbah, pharmacist delivering a khutbah, engineer a khutbah. How come I don't go and talk about pharmacy? I don't go and talk about engineering. That's not my field. Knowledge has become fragile. Charisma has replaced substance. Remember, we are looking for substance, not charisma. Because knowledge has become horizontal rather than vertical. By that I mean knowledge was always delivered by those who are scholars, the ulama, to those who know less. But now because of the internet, anybody can go on any website and suddenly it's becoming a great ayatollah. In my culture we have a particular joke that anytime it was thrown in the air, it's bound to land on a mujtahid. Because everybody claims to be a mujtahid. Right? Just because you saw a fatwa here or there doesn't make you a mujtahid at all. On the contrary, as I said, we have to be very careful, especially as radical Islam, unfortunately, is also transmitted on the internet. Many a time these Wahhabis and Salafis, etc., they are using the internet to try and get into our youth. We may not realize it, but they are using the most modern way. Have you seen terrorists who are rapping? They use rap music. They use hip-hop music to get to our youth because they know this is what will attract the youth. That's why, as I said, we have to be careful. One of the greatest challenges is for us to see and monitor where our youths are surfing, what side they are surfing. Otherwise, we are going to have problems with the next generation of youth. Sallu ala Muhammad. Tomorrow is the 7th of Muharram. It's the eve of the 7th of Muharram. It was a very fateful day because on the 7th of Muharram, a letter came from Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad telling Umar ibn Sa'ad that remove Hussein from the water. The tent should be away from the water. Not only that, look at what Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad says. Make sure that Hussein and his family do not get a drop of water. The same way that Uthman died thirsty, Hussein should die thirsty too. This was how bad these people were. On the 7th of Muharram, when that letter came, the order came from Umar ibn Sa'ad that Hussein will now move his tents away from the water. Abbas says, Mawla, we cannot let this happen. How will we not let this happen? Hussein does not want to start the fight. He said, Abbas, our time to fight has not yet come. Because Hussein wants peace. He will only fight in self-defense. Azadara Hussein. This was a fateful encounter. Imam Hussein tried his very best not to initiate any fight. Our riwayat tell us that he would meet with Umar ibn Asad sometimes in the middle of the night to see a way out. He told Umar ibn Asad, let me go. I will go away even back to Medina, or I will go even to India. But do not ask me to be the bay'ah to Yazid. This was a possibility. These things would not happen, that there would not be fighting. But of course, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad would have none of them. There are many heroes in Karbala. One of them was a person by the name of Nafi bin Hilal. Nafi was a great archer. He was one of the few who joined Imam Hussein even before Imam Hussein reached Kufa. Nafi was a great archer and a great horseman. He was one of those who tried to get water for Imam Hussein. Hajjaj, when he saw Nafi, he says, Nafi, you can have water, but you cannot take it for Hussein. Nafi says, Hajjaj, you want me to drink water, but the children of Hussein, the young children of the Prophet, who should have no water at all. A time comes when this Nafi comes to the battlefield. He's very brave. The only way that the enemies could kill him was to cut his arms. In fact, they broke both his arms. Nafi could not move anymore. Nafi was brought in front of Umar ibn Sa'ad and shivered. Umar ibn Sa'ad says to Nafi, what have you done? He says, I have killed many of your people and I have wounded many others. And if I could use my arms, I would have killed even more of you. Umar ibn Sa'ad says, what do you want me to do with you? He says, you can do anything you like to me, but you cannot take my religion away from me. Umar ibn Sa'ad says to Shimr, you can do what you like with him. Nafi could not move his arms anymore. Shimr goes and kills Nafi, a person who could not defend himself anymore. Azadarani Hussein, I want to recite the bayan of a young boy. On the eve of Ashur, when Hussein gathers his companions and his family members, and he tells them that, oh my companions, oh my family members, you may leave me now. This is going to be our final night. Tomorrow death will come. As the companions tell him, Rasulullah, we are not going to leave you. A young boy comes to Imam Hussein and he says, oh my uncle, will I die also tomorrow? This is Qasim, the nephew of Hussein. Hussein wants to test Qasim. He asks him, Ya Qasim, كيف الموت عندك? How do you see death? How do you perceive death? Qasim says, Ya Amma, ahla min al-asal. It is sweeter than honey. I will drink death the way that I drink honey. Hussein says, oh Qasim, not only will you die, even Ali Asghar will die tomorrow. Qasim says, will the enemy come to the tent? Hussein says, no, I will take Ali Asghar to the enemy tomorrow. Azadarani Hussein, on the day of Ashur, Qasim comes to his uncle. Oh my uncle, let me go and fight. Hussein says, I cannot let you fight. Jihad is not wajib on you. You are the symbol of my brother. Every time I wanted to remember my brother, I would look at you. Qasim goes back to his mother. He says, oh my mother, my uncle does not allow me to fight. Oh my Farwa, she says to Qasim, takes this tawiz. Inside it is a letter from your father. Take it to your uncle. Tell him to read it and he will allow you to go and fight. Hussein, he opens the tawiz. There is a letter from Hassan. And he said, oh my brother, on the day of Ashur, when you see this letter, give permission to Qasim to go and give his blood. He is my sacrifice for you on the day of Ashur. Hussein reads that letter. He cries for his brother. He says, Qasim, I cannot stop you anymore. This is the wish of my brother. Qasim is so little. He's so young. He cannot even mount the horse. Hussein puts him on his horse.